This is the meeting of the Athens Planning Commission, Thursday, May 15th. We're opening it at 12:01 or something like that. 03. We have a quorum with all the members of the Planning Commission present. And we have our new city planner, Paul Logue, present in the back. And very, very happy to see him on board. Everybody, there should be a sign-up sheet going around. If you'd like to speak, put an asterisk by your name on the sign-up sheet. And everybody who expects to speak, please stand up and affirm that what you'll say will be the truth. Do you affirm that what you say will be the truth? I do. Okay. Thank you. The first case is 0811 John Branner, Mound Preservation Lot, The Plains, Ohio. Steve Pearson, would you like to say anything about it first?
My name's Steve Pearson. I'm the Director of Code Enforcement for the City of Athens, and I have been sworn in. Several days ago, I was contacted by Surveyor John Branner about a property that he had surveyed in the Plains. The intent was to identify an area of land around an Indian mound. It would be kind of out on its own in the middle of a field, essentially just an area to enclose the mound. Access to it would be off of a private easement. From talking with John, it was more intended to be like a walking or a biking easement as opposed to something that would, that vehicles would be going over. The easement goes out to Johnson Road in the vicinity of the high school. So this is kind of between Johnson Road and First Street as you're headed up in the Plains toward the high school. Mr. Branner had asked that the split approval be expedited. In other words, could it be done without variances for being landlocked or access over private easement because of the nature of the split, and without sewage disposal approval, for example, too. Because the intent of the lot is not to create a building site, not to have any kind of a site that requires private sewage disposal system. It's not really intended to be accessed by vehicle. And I told him only this body, the Planning Commission, would have any kind of authority or jurisdiction to do that without variance, given the intent of the split. So that's kind of a little bit of background. Mr. Branner is here. I can explain things a little more, what actually the site is like, what's intended to be preserved, any information related to that.
Okay. Any questions for Steve? Thank you. Mr. Branner, would you like to?
I'm John Branner, surveyor. The intent of this is to preserve an existing Indian mound from destruction. The landowner was approached by the Archaeological Conservancy, and they go around the country buying up Indian mounds to preserve them forever. And as Steve stated, it's going to just be preserved as is, and be no development on it, no need for sewage, no structures. And time is a bit of the essence because they have a lot of projects, and I think this is a good opportunity for the community to have one of their cultural features preserved forever. I know our generation appreciates it, but 10 generations down the line might look at that land in a little different light. So I think any cooperation by the City Planning Commission would be appreciated.
I have a question about where the easement would come out on Johnson Road. Is it between the high school drive and Wingate?
It'll be between the high school drive and Wingate. More particularly, there's a cemetery too.
Right.
It'll be up above the cemetery. One reason about that, there's kind of planning going on to hopefully bring a bike spur up from the bike path to the high school, in which case this would tie in and everybody's online as a possible little feature for pedestrian and bicyclists to use it.
The conservancy implies, is that a local conservancy or is this a national organization?
It's Josh McConaughey. It's a national conservancy.
Okay.
It's a private foundation,
And their intention is to buy this particular lot from the owner, not to
Right.
put a conservation easement on it, but to buy it?
no, they buy it. The one.
Okay, they buy them. The long-term, I haven't heard of the conservancy, so I was just wondering, if it goes out of business, what happens with the piece of property, and those sort of issues. Because I work with Athens Conservancy, and that's always an issue when we go in and purchase property,
I think Josh McConaughey
Okay.
can answer those questions.
Any other questions for Mr. Branner?
Oh, I do, I'm sorry. John, will this be accessing any other properties? Because I see you have the garden communities there too.
No, you see the easement would just go right up to the mound there.
So the intention, if I'm hearing you correctly, is not going to be a vehicle easement, but rather a bicycle path or something? In other words, no cars, no trucks?
No, just maintenance vehicle plus pedestrian and possibly a future bike path spur.
Okay, and I guess other questions would be, I'm looking at this back map right here, which I guess is a product of a survey. It's 0.43 acres. How much of that is actually mound and how much is not mound, I guess is the question.
It has a little buffer around the mound, not enough that you can generally walk around without getting on the mound itself.
Okay. So in other words, let's say if this was considered a house as a mound and house, it would be what percentage of the property? Well, unfortunately, I did not go out there. I apologize, but
Yeah.
probably wouldn't find it either.
Maybe two-thirds of it, maybe.
Two-thirds? Okay. And the Garden Communities LTD what is that exactly? The next door neighbors, who are they? What are they?
Pardon?
What is next door to them?
Oh, well, I have interest in that property. It's land that I own.
So it's empty land right now?
Pardon?
It is empty land?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah, there's some, on First Street, there's some structures, but back there it's vacant.
Okay, so it has frontage on
Yeah,
Johnson or
yeah,
First Street?
Yeah.
And if this was purchased, there would be deed restrictions to it?
The mound property?
The mound area?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And that'd all be written in? I assume so, I'm just asking
Yeah,
the
it won't put
question.
any restrictions that non-building, they have their standard boilerplate deed to do the intention of preserving it as a mound.
Okay. Thanks.
Harry? Any questions?
Well, Christine's question, what happens if that land is abandoned or whatever?
Right.
Who then gets the land? The original owner? I guess he was going to explain that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind
Yeah.
of talked about that a little.
Come up to it. Speak.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Josh McConaughey, and I'm with the Archaeological Conservancy. Our main office is based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then we have a field office in Columbus, Ohio. So that's where I'm coming from. Just to give you a little background on our organization, we were founded in 1980, and it started with kind of startup money from a few different federal foundations. But at this point, we're pretty much solely funded by donations and some matching grants that we have from members, and we are a nonprofit organization. Your question about what if we kind of go out of business, there would be permanent deed restrictions on the property that would pretty much kind of like a conservation easement, keep it so that no development could ever happen, because our intention is to preserve Native American sites and other historic archaeological sites also. So that's kind of what would happen if we ever went out of business. But the way that we've set up our financial backing is that it would be really hard. And I think as a nonprofit that's been around for almost 30 years, we've set a good example of how we can sustain ourselves. We kind of have that seed money that's always there.
What kind of maintenance would be done on the site?
Mostly just mowing,
Uh-huh.
just keeping it looking nice. If it was to progress where we got a spur from the bike path up, which I think would be a great addition to this site and would really kind of just make it a really nice addition to the bike path and the plains and the Athens community, we would really want to keep it looking nice, maybe put a bench out there or something, and we usually will put up a marker that says what it is and what time period it's associated with, and just kind of the importance of it culturally.
I don't want to belabor the maintenance and care of it, but who's going to be responsible for the mowing?
We usually will contract a local person to kind of take care of it, and usually since our closest office is in Columbus, we're not too far, but we still need someone to keep an eye on things down here. So what we'll usually do is find what we call a site steward that is local to the area, someone that we can trust and just to keep an eye on the mound. Usually it's a neighbor or someone within the community, and we'll have them keep an eye on everything, and then we'll just have someone go out and mow it, whenever it's needed. Yes?
Would you be fencing the mound, or are you going to have an access to everybody to walk on it?
We would probably, because it's so out in the open, and it really would be hard to disturb it. I mean, there's always the chance of a looter coming and disturbing it, but chances are, the mound's been there for so long and it's so developed, people know that it's there and they get in it anyway. Some of our properties we do fence and try to keep people out because we fear that they'll get destroyed. But with something like this, with its notability, I think that we would want to keep it open and accessible to the public probably. We wouldn't want just anybody walking up there, but if we did do the bike path, obviously people would be going up and that would be perfectly fine. Because another aspect of what we do is also the education aspect. So we think that it's important to let people know that it's an important part of everyone's cultural history, not just Native Americans, and to keep people informed about it.
So your intention, do you normally buy just outright these properties? You don't do archaeological easements?
We do conservation easements, especially with a recent case that was had. I think it was Utah. If we can purchase it or get it donated, that is our ideal because we have so much more control over it. But if a property owner isn't interested in that, we'll do a conservation easement. But something that's supposed to be forever, but we're finding that they can be
But this
overturned.
particular one, you are buying outright, but you
Yes.
intend to put restrictive
Yes.
covenants on the deed that will go with the deed?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will say our intention is to own the property forever. There have been instances where we transferred property to state organizations, like we owned a property outside of Chillicothe, and the Hopewell National Cultural Historic Park incorporated that into their park, so we transferred that over to them.
So your intent, if you had to transfer it, you would transfer it to a state entity or a nonprofit?
Yeah,
So-
never a private individual or anything like that.
Any other questions? Any?
Probably it's more for Mr. Brenner. I noticed the path is kind of convoluted. Is that fine topography, or is it just?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the edge of that is kind of where it drops off a little bit.
Okay. I was just wondering. It looks like a long way to drive a mower. That's why. Okay. Thanks.
Anybody in the audience with questions, comments? Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion to approve this with the proviso that there be deed restrictions.
I would propose that we accept it with deed restrictions.
I'll second.
Oh, any discussion?
Well, okay, I assume the deed restrictions would be that there's no building on it whatsoever.
Right, like a conservation easement.
Yeah.
Okay.
No water, no sewer, no building.
No building. So,
Okay,
I think it's a great project.
yeah.
And it's great.
Okay, everybody in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you. Case 0810, minor subdivision, Mr. John Rinaldi.
Hello,
Okay,
how are you doing today?
we're here we are. How you doing?
I bought 3 copies.
Okay, we'll share.
It's a long journey in
Yeah.
time.
Impact attorney and something.
What I experienced in a piece of property I bought in the Plains. I bought a house that was dilapidated and vacant for several years, essentially because of where it existed, and the road frontage it had. And I referenced the Athens GIS site and downloaded the PDF, which gave me the length times the width, and I made some math calculations based on that and went ahead with the purchase of the property. So I just want to say that as kind of a premise here. The second page, I've got the subdivision regulations, which I understand. And this third page here is an overall view of the place known as the Plains, Ohio. And I'm providing this because, to me, I see that 80% of the Plains, I wanted to mention the lot size of the lots on the Plains. Moving over to this page here where it says Thomas Jean, I've got some calculations, and this is the calculations that I did before I bought the piece of property, giving me a total square footage of 63,000 square feet. I met with Steve Pearson, and he let me know that I need about 60,000 square feet minimum to do a 3-way lot split. This is how I came up with it, and it's basically math, and there's the formulas I used. I took a sampling of several neighborhoods existing in the Plains, and the first page here, I don't have it listed, but L23 is on the top right of the page. And I highlighted 5 lots in the Plains and took an average of their square footage, and I found it to be 5,646 square feet. I did the same thing on what's known as J24 here. I took an average of 3 additional samples of the neighborhood and came up with an average of 6,420 square feet. Same thing on M25 here, another sampling of the neighborhood in the Plains, and they came up with an average of 8,800 square feet. And the last one, P28, I took another sampling of some larger lots in the Plains. They came up with an average of 9,500, and last and finally another sampling of 16,881. My problem runs into when I had the land professionally surveyed. I came out instead of 60,000 to 59,897 square feet, where I thought 63,000 square feet existed. And the discrepancy was, I used some numbers on this R28 here. I added up 119 and 160 and used those numbers in my calculation. Well, in any event, I'm about 1/8 of 1% short of what I need. So that's the reason for my request for a variance. East 4th turns into actually Edward Street, and it's referred to as Edwards, or actually East 5th. So there's plenty of frontage here. Actually, there's a lot of frontage, and the variance, I believe, is minimal. And even at the remaining square footage of 19,522 square feet, I think I'm well above the average for the Plains, Ohio. There's water and sewer accessible.
Do we need an approval from the health department?
Water and
A letter's been provided to Steve from Rich Castler. He's in charge of the water and sewer in the plains.
Do you have one?
No,
I don't have one in my pack.
you don't have,
Oh, a letter?
No.
Sewer and water?
no, he said it's been provided to
Oh.
Steve, so,
Okay. I assume it's,
so the only, they both have adequate frontage. So the main problem is the minimum lot area.
Yeah, I'm a few feet short of that.
Any questions?
essentially, there's a couple things. I'm looking at the stuff you just submitted and an earlier proposed packet that shows the, if I'm reading it correctly, one shows the line goes all the way back to your previously split lot from 2003, and one looks like it cuts off and there's actually...
From 2003?
Is that what I'm reading here? Hold on a
No,
second.
Oh, you're talking about the .468 acres?
Yes.
Yeah, that's, I intended to do a three-way lot split, and that's already been done.
That's already been done.
And approved.
Yes.
What's, the irony of this whole situation is that, this is all my property, so,
Okay, what I'm looking at is the proposed is actually, does not go all the way back to that property. It cuts off before it reaches, the property split, coming off of...
I'm not following you here.
Okay, the property line coming off East 4th Street.
East
where you're
4th Street,
splitting.
yes.
Okay. Goes all the way back to that third piece of property, your previously split piece of property, or does it take a dog leg to the...
He's talking about these two pictures.
Yeah. I've got that one.
What is this? Is this your calculations on
That's
how-
what I used before I
calculate.
purchased the property, yes. And
Okay.
at that point in time, which was less than 6 months ago, it was all one piece.
Right, and this is the proposed
No,
split.
the proposed is this. The proposed is this.
Right.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Affirmative, yes.
Thank you.
And the irony of this whole thing is when Ken Highland split this, he included 20,371 square feet. So I could have this redrawn to where I'd be at 19,890 if I had to. But I firmly believe and feel that considering the average lot size in the plains, at 19,522 with the frontage and the access to water and sewer, meets what I need to accomplish with this property.
Okay, and there's no structures on any of these lots right now
There's a house down here on the first one, which has been,
built? Okay. And that's facing the East 5th Street?
affirmative.
Okay.
That's also known as Edwards Street.
Edwards Street, okay.
Because 4th and 5th never actually intersect.
Oh, they don't?
But there is an intersection there with Fourth and Edwards?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's interesting. It's,
Yeah.
the utility company calls it Edwards, some people call it 5th Street.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a question. On this,
Absolutely.
the portion that you say that you have a house already erected on, the .468 acres, was
Yeah.
that approved this year with a variance? Is that the 08-03?
You would not need a variance for that, ma'am, because it's over 20,000 square feet and there's 90 foot of frontage. So I have
What-
the approval in hand, I just need to record it. But before I recorded it, I wanted to take this step.
Approved 08-03. What does that mean?
Approved 0803.
I guess,
I'd have to
Steve,
refer
it's
that
on
to Steve.
this
Steve is the one that approved it.
that you
There's-
provided.
That was approved probably about a month ago. Not by me. I mean, it was forwarded to the planning commission, signed off by a planning commissioner.
We must have done
I guess what I'm
Okay.
looking at is you kind of created this,
Remember,
what you backed yourself into a corner there. There was not enough with the entire, you always wanted to have three
No, actually,
building
Date or
sites.
case number.
If we took it from the top, before I purchased this property, going by the numbers on the plat, and the formulas I've provided, that showed me I had 63,000 square feet, where 20,000 square feet her lot where I wouldn't be in the position I'm in now.
Right.
When I had it surveyed, it came to my attention that I had 59,897 square feet. So at which point, just to make things easier, I isolated the lot that would not need any approval.
So it's some sort of.
So if that earlier split, that 468 acres, .468 acres, was done earlier, then what we're doing now is considering the split that would make these two lots and
Affirmative.
that would require a variance for
That
minimum lot
difference
size.
between the 20,000 and the 19,522.
Okay, Steve, do you have any comments about this? Anybody have any?
Question you might have?
Anybody have any questions?
Actually, I have one from Melissa. Melissa, by any chance, do you have the minutes for this year's in your computer?
No, I have them downstairs in a book. I have
Okay.
to print them out, but then I do corrections and print them out. So.
Okay, I'm trying to remember 0803, that's why. Okay.
0803, if that was a case number, it would have indicated the 8th case of 2003.
Or,
No, it was the third
Or-
case.
When-
Third case of 2008, based on how you're,
I don't remember that.
803,
I don't remember
okay.
what it was about. I had to look at it.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking. I don't remember anything about it myself. Steve, do you want to say something? You can take the seat down there.
That'd be great, thank you.
I believe, as I've mentioned many times in the past, for the whole 14 years I've been here, my office and myself in particular process minor subdivisions for the Planning Commission. Subdivision regs say that the Planning Commission has jurisdiction over minor and major subdivisions. I believe I've mentioned before, too, that I process anywhere from 50 to 100 of these a year. Lately, there have been fewer. In the past, either the mayor or the service safety director has been the Planning Commission's representative to sign off on minor subdivision. It's not necessarily, every subdivision, minor subdivision, does not come before the entire commission. If you would like to do it that way, I can do it. The problem is, the way the law is written, if you meet all the requirements of a minor subdivision, it has to be reviewed and approved within 5 days. So that's why administratively in the past, it was never brought as a case before the entire Planning Commission, because there's a 5-day window that's the maximum allowed by law to respond to a request.
but if that one got a case number,
That's
then did it come to us or did?
No, that's not a case
It was
number.
a permit.
That's just, I have the code office has maintained for decades a list of minor subdivision requests. Each one has a number. It's similar. It's actually, in our record keeping, it's called LS 0803, lot split 0803. We keep things for building permits that are called, like, for example, BP 0803. You have PC 0803.
But we're only getting this because it doesn't meet the minimum lot footage.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No,
Now,
we
and just a
don't
little
want to have-
clarification too, the 0803 was approved. It met all the requirements. Had proper road frontage. It included also in the record, as Mr. Rinaldi alluded to, a letter from Rich Kastler, who's the director of Plains Water and Sewer District, that sewer and water service were available. So if you have the frontage requirements, the area requirements, the approval of the health department, a survey done by a professional engineer that's been checked for math accuracy by the county engineer's office, those are the 5 components of what you need to have a minor subdivision approved. And Mr. Rinaldi's, the one that was already approved that has the house on it, met all those requirements. And again, action has to be taken within 5 days. So as a new planning commission, if you want to discuss the procedure for accepting applications or how you want me to process those, or if you would like to appoint one member in particular to do that review on your behalf, that'd be great. What happened several years ago was the Planning Commission gave me authorization to approve minor subdivisions of land. That was done verbally. I suppose if you want to appoint me in writing to do that, that would be fine, but given some things that have happened in the past couple years, I don't do that anymore without written authorization, and then there might even be a question if the Planning Commission can't even give me that authority.
Thank you
So
for
that's
clarifying
a little
that.
history on, I mean,
Yeah.
that's just kind of how it worked in the past. Probably, you might want to just discuss how you want to handle minor subdivision.
Well,
It's a lot of paperwork that has to happen fairly quickly.
we were just wondering if we had group amnesia.
That's why.
Nope.
Thank you.
That's what I was worried about,
It
actually.
was before Paula and I were on.
Well, good excuse. Very good
Just a
excuse.
small group amnesia.
The other question I would have is the shape of these lots. I mean, why not split it so it's perpendicular to Edwards rather than 4th Street?
That's meeting the requirements for the 90 feet of frontage.
Well, okay, if I would take these lots and, this...
Oh, are you saying maybe split them so East Fifth Street?
Yeah,
There's a drop off there.
okay, so it's
It's like
topography that...
literally I'd say maybe a 70-degree angle going up.
Okay, so mindset-wise, if I was going to build on the interesting shaped lot there with the frontage on Edwards or East Fifth, how would I go about doing it if there's a drop
There's
off?
plenty of room. There's plenty of flat. I would say it's flat up until about maybe 10 feet, 20 feet off of the property line there. And again, why I'm taking this step and coming in here is because I have not approached the 3 possible neighbors to simply purchase less than 100 square feet of land. That's why I don't want to have to do that, and that's why I feel this is necessary. I mean, I could talk to this person, and this person, and I wouldn't be here today. You wouldn't see it. You wouldn't hear the argument. It would get signed off on. You have 5 days to do it. So I'm asking kindly that I'm in a bind, and I used a math theorem here to come up with my square footage. I was at 63,000. You can prove it. It's math. That's the numbers I used right from the city site. So that's what I did. I took the steps. I purchased the property, and Ken Highland says you've got 59,997. So that I'm 100 square feet short, considering a 60,000 square foot piece of property. That's why I'm here. Before I have to knock on neighbors' doors, and so I'd like you to see it in that light, if you'd be so kind to.
Okay, any other questions? Anybody in the public?
I think this is a good point, is that if people are using the information off you use the GIS lines.
You download, that's a PDF file. You
Right.
can print out.
And most of the time when you download those sort of information, there's usually a disclaimer on it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
But we better, that's a point that the disclaimer should make sure that it's there and it's well documented.
I realize
because-
that's not law, and that
Right,
would be
right.
impossible.
But we don't
to-
want to have other people base their decisions
Sure.
on a similar situation, then they get into this, because it's, we want information that's accurate as it can be, but people have to also realize that in order to get true accuracy, you have to survey.
Hire a surveyor, absolutely, which I've done.
So, right, so that may be, we may have to explicitly say something like that if this is something that people do a lot. So,
I use it as a guide, as like a rough estimate or a
Right.
thumb, if you would. I like the feature. You can zoom in and zoom out. I had an RV in my yard for a while, and it was funny because the picture was taken when the RV was there, but it's not there anymore. But the RV is still online.
So you can reminisce about it?
I can share it with you today.
Okay, we need a motion to approve this with the recommendation for a variance for minimum lot area.
I will approve the lot split with the variance for the minimum lot area as described.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Passes unanimously.
we probably have no official.
Do we have any communications? I don't.
Steve, you do.
I don't know if that's fine, no.
Steve, do you have any communications for us?
Steve, did you want to communicate on the APAC?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I had contacted the Health Department Director Chuck Hammer this morning, actually regarding a lot split in Dover 13, way on the other side of Chansey, within the 3 mile. And it was a parcel of land that was a little over 5 acres. They wanted to split off an acre. The residual would be less than 5, therefore would need sewage disposal approval. And so I just happened to be talking to Chuck about that when he mentioned that the representatives from APAC had been in to speak with him. And he had relayed to them that they need to provide him with some information regarding the soil, and then a recommendation from a soil scientist or a soils engineer recognized by the health department regarding the ability to put in a replacement sewage disposal system, because the one that's there now is one that wouldn't be approved. So they know that they have to provide that information to the health department, and then the health department is going to look at the property as if it were a residential lot. So that's the direction we're headed on that. There needs to be some, I mean, there's a system there now that works, met the requirements when it was installed. However, with the higher standards now, it might take a little more area to approve a system there that needs a little more area and a certain type of soil and area of soil to function as a replacement. So yes, that is in the works, and it's tracking right now. Next thing is contact the soil scientists, a list of those available at the health department that are approved who can submit such information for any lot split, for example. We're getting to the point now where even though the city doesn't necessarily have the ability to adopt large lot regulations from 5 to 20 acres now allowed by state enabling legislation, recently not approved on the county level, but I guess municipalities aren't allowed to do it. But still, I always, on your behalf, make contact with Chuck Hammer at the health department, even when you have properties over 5 acres. There was a proposal a while back out on Stagecoach Road for very large acreage. I forget, it was 30 or 40 acres. They split it up into over 5 acre sections, and it ended up, when all was said and done, even though there were some over, they were all over 5, there were a couple of them that needed almost 8 acres, just because of the soil. And so the number of potential lots was reduced, but in the long run, what you have is compliant properties that meet current standards and have the ability to have replacement systems or retrofitting done in the future. So there's a lot of things that I'm doing with Mr. Hammer that are not. I don't know. We just want to be, if anything, we want to err on the side of caution. Because when you look at a two-dimensional map, it really doesn't tell the story about the third dimension, particularly the depth, the soil.
At the next meeting on June 5th, we would like to start with a half-an-hour workshop on the topic of temporary signs and political signs, and try to give you some answers and get some answers from you about what we need to do to change the sign ordinance. And so that's just everybody's got that thick packet, right?
Somewhere.
So that's just sort of a heads up. And I saw an article about the ACLU in Akron and the political signs.
Was it? I thought it was Reynoldsburg.
Well, maybe it was
It was outside
Reynoldsburg.
Akron.
Yeah. Anyway,
$5 fee for each political sign.
that you couldn't. No, they said they couldn't charge a fee, and they couldn't limit the time, and they couldn't
Right.
limit the size.
From reading the article, I believe it was the city of Reynoldsburg, had required, the city, our current regulations say each candidate has to post a $100 bond. It's to defray the cost of collecting the signs if they aren't taken down within 5 days after the election, which all of that stuff kind of goes by the board with the Painesville, Dworkin, and Bernstein case that I've mentioned several times. It was I guess in Reynoldsburg it was $5 a sign. So that's what the challenge is about, that you're treating that type of temporary sign differently than you would treat a temporary real estate sign or any other type of temporary sign.
Well,
That's part of what you have to be content neutral and kind of neutral on everything. If it's a temporary sign, it's a temporary sign. The content of the sign doesn't necessarily mean it can be regulated differently than any other type. And
So we
political
could
signs
have-
are the ones that are kind of sticky because they involve rights related to freedom of speech. And
So we could have just one temporary sign ordinance and include the political signs in that?
my understanding is that you could distinguish different types of signs, but you'd be very cautious to treat them differently. So you could have different types. You could say temporary signs are, and here's the list of temporary signs. You have to look, my understanding is you have to look at things like, are some allowed to be larger and some only allowed to be smaller, and if so, why? Is there a good reason? Basically, I guess it's just to create an even playing field for whatever the person is trying to express with their sign. They have the right to express themselves on a lot of different topics. And political sign just happens to be the one that's a little more sensitive. There's still political signs up there right now where technically the city's laws say they should have been down a long time ago. But I personally hesitate to appear to be infringing on anybody's right to express their political belief or, their freedom of speech. So it's a timely topic, and it seems to come up every election, doesn't it? I would say it's probably the third time we talked about it.
We'll look at the material you gave us and try to come up with something simple.
Yeah, you should have copies of the Painesville, Dworkin, and Bernstein case, a summation by the State Supreme Court, some things from the Center for, I forget, Center for something or other. It's a think tank in Washington about temporary signs.
Okay.
So, as opposed to giant billboards.
And in theory, we should also be looking at what we presently have in code, because we do have temporary sign ordinances in code, special event signs. We have size regulations for those, depending on the number of lanes on a street, I believe, right, or a zone, right? So
usually the temporary advertising is driven by the allowable maximum square footage of a freestanding sign in an area. But for example, and as I pointed out several times at Planning Commission in the past, you have a section in temporary signs, for example, that says balloons are prohibited unless permitted, with no criteria on why you would refuse an application for a special event with balloons. We talked about that before, and as a matter of fact, the car dealerships have been very gracious in the last, I started probably in the summertime, letting them know that, balloons wouldn't be allowed anytime soon, and that the city was working on some other regulations regarding balloons. But the car dealerships, just to be upfront and honest with you, they're getting a little antsy. They like their balloons. I've encouraged them to work with the Chamber of Commerce. And also anybody who has some interest in any type of sign. The Chamber was the one that lobbied for the changes in, I believe it was 2003. You remember Larry Payne came in. In the past, on political sign changes, the parties themselves came in. I think former Councilman Howard Stevens came in to lobby for the little extra, square footage on the signs, because the standard for people who published and manufactured such signs, the regs we had were for old signs. The new signs were just a little bit bigger. So there's always been quite a bit of input, and I know Mr. Slago always says that he was on the 1989 sign committee. It's kind of on his resume.
He's a survivor.
does it need its resume?
And there are people who have expressed, I think members of the executive committee of the neighborhood associations and some other people have expressed interest in being on a sign task force that we had talked about too, if you want to look at the entire body of the sign regulations. It's a huge section of the zoning
Well,
code.
let's start by looking at the political and temporary signs.
Okay.
And if we only devote a half an hour to it, we're not going to come to a solution, but I think at least we may be able to figure out what some of the questions are and some of the issues.
Okay.
And so it'll be a start. Thank you. Opportunity for citizens to speak about items not covered on the agenda. Anybody want to talk? Okay. Minutes. We have the minutes of last May 1st meeting. Anybody have any changes, corrections?
No, they look fairly accurate. I guess I thought I talked more than this. That's about that. That's all about.
Well, there is on the back of the front page.
Oh, I know, yeah. I thought I rambled a lot more.
She just condenses you.
Okay.
Yes,
The
the-
Reader's Digest version.
we're green, we're double-sided. Thank you, Melissa. Melissa, I should have gotten back with you, but on the first case, DeMott, it says the problem would be to split the property into 2 lots with a variance for the size. For
That's
the
really
size
good.
of the lots. It was the depth to width, but that might be the correct code citation.
Was
Is
the
this
DeMott
memorized, Steve?
property on Four Ridge Road?
Mulligan.
Mulligan.
That's what I
well,
thought.
that's
It
another-
says, yeah.
Didn't even catch that. If I rattled off the ACC, would you be able to tell me if that's depth to width?
Yeah,
But I can clarify that just. After the
21.06.
meeting, Melissa and I worked together to come up with the document, the recommendation of the commission to forward to City Council. So that document reflects the information, the reference number, the width-to-depth ratio. So,
Okay, with
Well,
those,
I think that there's just one, the communication about the Conkle property. It didn't go on the next agenda. I think maybe that should just say on a future agenda, because it's up to them to clean up the nuisances.
Right.
That's under communications, the second star.
Go ahead and write your corrections on those copies, and
Okay.
I will add them up and take care of it.
okay.
I move we accept the minutes as amended and corrected.
Okay, second.
Oh, a second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, do I have a motion for adjournment?
good, one more thing. Just an update on the Conkle property. They have been also back in contact with Mr. Hammer, and he's working with them to make sure that the soil survey area and any proposed lot lines, kind of coincide. So that's
Right.
still in the works. Mr. Hammer's looking to correct some existing problems there on the site,
Right.
abate some things that will condition his approval.
Right, and that's what we
So-
talked about the last,
Yeah,
that
you'll-
they needed, we felt they also needed to be addressed before, and whether, they weren't there, so I was hoping that would get communicated to them, to the Conkles, that was important. So,
So, again, that's still all in the works.
okay.
Thank you. Movement for adjournment.
I'll move.
I'll second. We're done.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.